keep awake. We heard those lines read. How do you stay ready, Fort Washington? How do you stay generous at the same time? Because I don't know about you, but to me, those are two different things. Being awake sometimes makes me angry and want to hold on to things. But being generous means letting those things go. We have all seen enough disaster movies where one group has been prepared for something horrible and then feels conflicted or sort of downright refused to help those who did not prepare. Readiness doesn't seem to fit with generosity. But it is that crossroad that I want to talk about today. And I talk about that from the perspective of my grandmother. My grandmother, Evelyn Whitelow, dwelled at the crossroads of readiness and generosity. She was a part of a generation that knew nothing but generosity. She was a part of that northern migration. She was from the red clay hills of Nutbush and Brownsville, Tennessee, and she made her way all the way up to the south side of Chicago and the steel mills of Gary, Indiana as well. But it is the south side of Chicago where I knew and felt that sense of generosity. On the south side of Chicago, 63rd and Kenmark, where it was so cold, I remember standing on the corner with my little brother, waiting for the bus and having to cover him with my arms against the wind. But my grandmother made her way up here as part of that northern migration that Isabel Wilkerson talks so eloquently about in that book, The Warmth of Other Suns, where she details how African Americans in the Deep South looked to the north for relief from Southern oppression. Very often they were pulled off of trains and stopped from leaving. But most of them, a lot of them made it up here. They made it up to Chicago, they made it up to New York, they made it up to Baltimore, they made it up to Philadelphia and Detroit. But it was also in her arms, it was in her hands that I had my first taste of worship. She would sit me in bed with her, I think I must have been about 3 or 4, and she would read the 23rd Psalm to me. This was my first introduction to God, to relationship. And it was given to me in the arms and the warmth of this woman that I love late at night. And let me tell you something else. She would let me eat her Butterfingers. And I didn't like Butterfingers, but I liked the chocolate. She would let me eat the chocolate off of her Butterfinger. And then she would eat it inside. Now, I love my son. But I am not going to eat candy that has been in his mouth. That is the unconditional love and generosity that my grandmother had for me. That was our tradition. I would eat the chocolate off the Butterfinger, she would eat the rest, and we would read the 23rd Psalm in bed, tucked warm. So if we're talking about generosity, I must begin with my grandmother. I remember the way that she would hold her arms open wide to me when I would come up to her house. And I knew that no matter what I wanted or what I needed, she would find a way to get it for me. If I had told her, you know what, I think I would like to shovel snow for the rest of my life, she would have said, you know what, baby, well, they have shovels at Sears. Do you want a gold one or do you want tortoise shell? What color shovel do you want for that dream? The other thing that I'm reminded of is her apartment. She was in one of those long railroad flats. It had 4 bedrooms and 1 bath. And the thing about that apartment is it ensured that no one in our family was ever homeless. People who were coming up from down south always had a place to stay. I remember my mother often talks about how when relatives would come up from down south, she would wake up early in the morning and cook. I had a variety of uncles who stayed there throughout the years. There was always somebody else there. was never an empty house. It was a place for gathering for not just holidays, but Saturday nights.
Yes.
It ensured that, like I said, no one was ever homeless, no one was ever hungry, and most importantly, no one was ever alone. Now, I'm not sure if she saw the fruits of her generosity, but I know that she had a hope for it. And one of those things that she did for me when I was going away to college, I said, you know, I think I want to quilt. She used to make quilts. Her hands were never busy. We want to talk about grandma's hands. She was always doing something. If she wasn't cooking, she was baking, or she was gardening, or she was drawing in the corners of books and on matchbook covers. But I asked her one year for a white quilt, not just any old color. I wanted a white one. And I was thinking that it was going to be an ordinary quilt like the others that she built or that she created. And when she presented it to me, it is pure white satin. And she told me that she discovered when she was first making it that she couldn't be doing her regular duties, that she had to change her clothes when she was working on this quilt, because one time she had been cooking and she was working on the quilt and she realized that she had gotten sauce on her sleeve and it had gotten on the quilt and she had undone a whole portion of it. So she would prepare herself. She would wash her hands and change her clothes to work on the quilt for me. And when she presented it, I had no idea that it was going to be this thing of beauty. And I am so grateful that I still have it. So if we're talking about generations of generosity, I know that maybe I can't go on Antiques Roadshow, but I know that I have this quilt that I can give to my son, and that I hope that he can give to his children, that we have something that ties us to her. We have physical evidence of her generosity. Your hands, grandma's hands. Like the song says, he used to hand me a piece of candy. Grandma's hands picked me up each time I fell. And if I get to heaven, I'm going to look for grandma's hands. I'm going to look for her.
I find, Pastor Bridget, that looking is something that many of us are doing today in these perilous times. Oh, how we long for the generosity of grandma's hands. With bills being passed in Congress that go against everything we believe generosity to be, that go against Jesus' plea for us to love our neighbors as ourselves, it's hard to see generosity in the world. We're looking for grandma's hands in every direction. We are searching for that generosity. I imagine that the audience of this text, the audience that was hearing and reading this text in Mark, were looking for that same generosity in grandma's hands. I imagine that this audience, this persecuted peoples, this people who were going against the empire daily, whose family members were being killed and being sent places that they weren't supposed to be sent to, these people were looking for that generosity. Mark 13 is a peculiar text because it kind of foretells of these end times. Jesus is talking to the disciples, and the disciples, they had just come out of the temple and having this encounter in the temple, this interesting encounter in the temple. And Jesus is talking to the disciples about this event that is going to take place, that the Son of Man is going to come and gather them all up and take them away from the perilous times that they are living in, that the Son of Man is going to come and rescue them and offer them salvation. And Jesus is going on and on about this, but the thing that's peculiar to me is that Jesus never gives them a place or a time.
Yes.
Unlike other apocalyptic texts like in Revelations or in the book of Daniel, Jesus never gives a place or a time. And I can only imagine what the disciples must have been feeling like. Like, I would have felt some type of way. You know, Jesus coming in here, he's telling me about all this great stuff that's about to happen, that salvation is coming and that it's imminent. And then he says something like, stay awake. or be alert, or pay attention to the fig tree. Now, I don't know about you, but Pastor Bridget, I would have been like, when is it happening, Jesus? Is it happening tomorrow? Is it happening next year? Who is being gathered? But Jesus doesn't offer any concrete information. He leaves them with the command, stay awake, stay woke. That's what he says these days, stay woke. Jesus tells them to stay woke for your salvation. And I started thinking about all the times in my life when I was looking for salvation in the wrong direction. That perhaps salvation was actually already here, that perhaps the hope of this text, since it is Hope Sunday, perhaps the hope of this text is that salvation has already arrived. And I think about the times in my life when there was $10 in my bank account and I was praying to God for salvation, for a financial breakthrough, and God sent me the right job and this and that and the other. And God was like, salvation is right here. There's a hot meal right here. That salvation is over there. There's a cup of coffee over here. And if I would have just opened my eyes and take a scan of my peripheral vision instead of looking up to God and looking side by side to my neighbor, maybe I would have seen the Son of Man's arrival right there. That's the salvific hope of this text, that through grandma's hand, salvation has already arrived. That if we just open our eyes and witness the generosity that is around us and witness the generosity that is within us, we will know that salvation is here. That staying woke to the prophecy is not just an empty waiting. The choir sang about waiting today. It's not just an empty waiting, but it's a giving while you wait. It's a loving while you wait. It's a caring for while you wait. It's serving your faith community while you wait. That the hope and the love of Jesus and the grace of God is already in the world. So my question to you today, Fort Washington, is, will you be generous while you wait? Will you have the same salvific hope that was present in Grandma's hands?
Because the kingdom is here. It is at hand. The use of the words hands is very deliberate. Open your hands. Look and see what is there. This is the method for bringing the kingdom close. We have everything that we need. Like the song says, Grandma's hands used to hand me a piece of candy. That was the hope when I would come to church, that she was always going to have some candy, those little orange slices with the little sugar on top, or the little red candies that were like strawberry inside that you can't even find in a regular store. Grandma's hands used to hand me a piece of candy, pick me up each time I fell. If I get to heaven, I'll look for Grandma's hands. I don't know about you, but I'm going to look for her. So the good news, Fort Washington, is, like Nia says, the hope and the salvific vision is here. It is at hand. We can be generous right now. We all have had someone who has shown us how to be generous through the generations. We have all had someone who has shown us how to move mountains and change lives. And we most certainly can look to the example of Jesus as someone who has had an impact. Someone whose vision for this kingdom, not kingdom, but kingdom, because we're all kin. How this vision can be realized right now. We don't have to wait. So we are, the good news is that right now we can have this. But I wonder sometimes about my grandmother, who did not necessarily always see the fruition of her work. When I go back to Chicago, sometimes I see the building that she lived in. It has been gentrified and renovated, and it is lovely. My grandmother deserved to live like that. It makes me angry that she did not have those modes of comfort. It makes me angry that she did not have good medical care that could have caught her cancer before. It was everywhere. My grandmother deserved better, but my grandmother had hope not just in me, but that the things that she was doing would sprout later on, that there were seeds that she was scattering.
And some of those seeds came by way of prayer.
Yes.
That if you don't have money to give or things to give, that you can be generous with your prayer.
Yes.
Is that right, Pastor?
That is right. Somebody pray for me, had me on their mind, took the time and prayed for me. I'm so glad they prayed. I'm so glad they prayed. I'm so glad they prayed for me.
And sometimes that prayer comes by way of hands and feet.
Yes.
That we can pray, and we can work while we pray, we can care for while we pray, we can love while we pray.
Yes. Keep awake.
Keep awake.
Keep awake.